A daring proposition. Zelensky's offer to resign. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy sent shockwaves through the international community on Sunday, February 23, 2025. His announcement was not just a political maneuver, but a bold statement that reverberated across the globe. In an unexpected move, he announced his willingness to step down from his position. This was a decision that no one saw coming, a move that left both his supporters and critics in a state of disbelief. But this was no ordinary resignation. Zelenskyy attached two significant conditions to his departure: peace for a war-torn Ukraine or immediate NATO membership. These conditions were not just demands, they were a plea for the future of his country. The world watched, captivated by this daring proposition. News outlets around the globe covered the story extensively, analyzing every possible outcome and implication. Was this a desperate gamble or a calculated move by a leader determined to secure his nation's future? Analysts and political experts debated the motivations behind Zelenskyy's offer, each presenting their own theories. Zelenskyy's declaration came at a pivotal moment. The timing of his announcement was crucial, coming at a time when the world was already on edge. 3 years into the brutal Russian invasion, Ukraine found itself locked in a conflict that had claimed countless lives and displaced millions. The war had turned cities into battlegrounds and homes into ruins. The Ukrainian people had shown indomitable spirit and resilience, but the war had taken a heavy toll. Families were torn apart, and the nation's infrastructure was in shambles. The country was scarred, its economy battered. The once thriving cities now stood as grim reminders of the ongoing conflict. Zelenskyy's offer, therefore, was more than just a personal decision. It was a reflection of the harsh realities facing his nation. It was a call to the international community to take decisive action. The world held its breath. The stakes were incredibly high, and the outcome of this proposition could change the course of history. Would Zelenskyy's gamble pay off? Could this bold move bring about the peace that Ukraine so desperately needed? Could his offer break the deadlock in peace talks? The international community was now faced with a critical decision. Or would it further embolden Russia, perceiving it as a sign of weakness? The risk was enormous, and the consequences could be dire. The stakes could not have been higher. Every move, every decision was now under intense scrutiny. Ukraine's fate, and indeed the stability of the entire region, hung precariously in the balance. The world watched, waiting to see what the next chapter in this unfolding drama would bring. Peace or NATO? The non-negotiable conditions. Zelensky's offer was not a blank check. It was a strategic and well-thought-out proposition aimed at securing Ukraine's future. He knew that his resignation alone would not bring about the change his country needed. Therefore, he set forth two non-negotiable conditions that he believed were essential for Ukraine's stability and prosperity. He made it abundantly clear that his resignation was contingent on two non-negotiable conditions. These conditions were not just political maneuvers, but were deeply rooted in the aspirations and needs of the Ukrainian people. The first was a guarantee of peace for Ukraine. This was not merely a ceasefire or a temporary truce, but a lasting resolution to the conflict that respected Ukraine's sovereignty and territorial integrity. Zelenskyy envisioned a future where Ukrainians could live without the constant fear of war and violence. This was not merely a ceasefire or a temporary truce, but a lasting resolution to the conflict that respected Ukraine's sovereignty and territorial integrity. He wanted a comprehensive peace agreement that would address the root causes of the conflict and ensure that Ukraine's borders were respected by all parties. Zelenskyy was adamant that his people had endured enough bloodshed and deserved to live in a secure and peaceful nation. The toll of the conflict had been immense, with countless lives lost and communities torn apart. He believed that a genuine and lasting peace was the only way to honor the sacrifices made by the Ukrainian people. The second condition was immediate NATO membership for Ukraine. Zelenskyy argued that Ukraine had proven itself as a reliable partner and a staunch defender of democracy in the face of Russian aggression. He believed that NATO membership was the only way to guarantee Ukraine's long-term security and prevent future attempts at Russian interference. Zelenskyy argued that Ukraine had proven itself as a reliable partner and a staunch defender of democracy in the face of Russian aggression. He believed that NATO membership was the only way to guarantee Ukraine's long-term security and prevent future attempts at Russian interference. This was not just about military alliances, but about aligning Ukraine with the values and principles of the democratic world. He believed that NATO membership was the only way to guarantee Ukraine's long-term security and prevent future attempts at Russian interference. By joining NATO, Ukraine would be part of a collective defense system that would deter any potential aggressors and provide a sense of security to its citizens. This demand for immediate membership, however, was a bold move. It bypassed the usual lengthy accession process and put the onus on NATO members to make a decisive choice. Zelenskyy was essentially challenging NATO to stand by its principles and support a nation that had been on the front lines of the struggle for democracy. It bypassed the usual lengthy accession process and put the onus on NATO members to make a decisive choice. This was a test of NATO's commitment to its own values and to the security of Europe as a whole. Zelenskyy was asking for more than just words of support. He was asking for concrete actions that would secure Ukraine's future. These two conditions, peace and NATO membership, were not separate demands but two sides of the same coin for Zelenskyy. He understood that true peace was impossible without security, and that security could only be guaranteed by a united front against Russian aggression. For him, these conditions were intertwined and essential for the future of Ukraine. He understood that true peace was impossible without security, and that security could only be guaranteed by a united front against Russian aggression. Zelenskyy believed that by securing NATO membership, Ukraine would not only protect itself, but also contribute to the stability and security of the entire region. His offer, therefore, was a calculated move to force the West's hand and extract concrete commitments for Ukraine's future. Zelenskyy was not just thinking about the immediate situation, but was looking ahead to the long-term stability and prosperity of his country. His conditions were a bold and strategic attempt to secure a better future for Ukraine and its people. A war of words. Zelenskyy's public dispute with Trump. This conflict, which played out on the global stage, was not just a simple disagreement but a complex and multifaceted confrontation that had significant implications for international relations and the political landscape in both Ukraine and the United States. Zelenskyy's offer to resign did not emerge in a vacuum. It was a dramatic gesture that underscored the intense pressure he was under, both domestically and internationally. The Ukrainian president, who had risen to power on a platform of reform and anti-corruption, found himself in the crosshairs of a political storm that was as much about global power dynamics as it was about personal vendettas. It unfolded against the backdrop of a highly publicized and increasingly acrimonious dispute with former U.S. President Donald Trump. The media frenzy that surrounded their interactions only served to amplify the tensions, with headlines and news reports dissecting every statement and move made by both leaders. Trump, known for his unpredictable pronouncements and penchant for stirring controversy, had taken aim at Zelenskyy, accusing him of being responsible for the war in Ukraine. These accusations were not only baseless, but also deeply damaging, as they sought to undermine Zelenskyy's credibility at a time when he was striving to lead his country through a period of significant turmoil. This accusation, devoid of any factual basis, was met with bewilderment and condemnation from the international community. Leaders and diplomats from around the world expressed their support for Zelenskyy, recognizing the challenges he faced and the unfairness of Trump's attacks. Trump's attacks went beyond mere political rhetoric. They took on a personal and often offensive tone. He used his platform to launch a series of verbal assaults that were designed to belittle and discredit Zelenskyy, portraying him as an inexperienced and ineffective leader. He publicly referred to Zelenskyy as a dictator and a modestly successful comedian, seeking to undermine his credibility and legitimacy as a leader on the world stage. These comments were not only insulting, but also strategically aimed at weakening Zelenskyy's position both domestically and internationally. Trump's motivations for this relentless assault remained unclear, but some analysts speculated that he was attempting to deflect blame for his own administration's controversial dealings with Russia. By targeting Zelenskyy, Trump may have been trying to shift the focus away from his own political vulnerabilities and onto a convenient scapegoat. This very public spat between the two leaders cast a long shadow over the ongoing peace negotiations. The diplomatic efforts to resolve the conflict in Ukraine were already fraught with difficulties, and the added tension from the Trump-Zelenskyy dispute only made the situation more complex and challenging. Trump's pronouncements, often at odds with the official stance of the U.S. government, created confusion and sowed discord among allies. The mixed messages coming from the U.S. administration made it difficult for other nations to understand and respond to the situation effectively. Zelenskyy, for his part, faced the daunting challenge of navigating this diplomatic minefield while simultaneously trying to secure his nation's future. His leadership was put to the test as he worked to maintain international support, manage internal political pressures, and address the ongoing conflict in Ukraine. The stakes were incredibly high, and the outcome of this dispute would have far-reaching consequences for both Ukraine and the broader international community. From comedian to statesman, Zelensky's response to Trump's taunts. In the face of Trump's relentless attacks, Zelenskyy displayed remarkable restraint and dignity. While acknowledging that Trump's words were far from complimentary, he chose to take the higher ground. He reminded the world that he was the democratically elected leader of Ukraine, entrusted with the mandate of his people who had given him a resounding 73% of the vote. Zelenskyy, once a comedian himself, refused to be drawn into a mudslinging contest. Instead of engaging in tit-for-tat exchanges, Zelenskyy chose to focus on what truly mattered, the lives and well-being of the Ukrainian people. He highlighted the plight of his nation, ravaged by a war they did not start. He spoke of the resilience of Ukrainian citizens, their unwavering determination to defend their homeland, and their yearning for peace. His response, devoid of bitterness or recrimination, resonated with audiences worldwide. Zelenskyy's measured and statesmanlike response stood in stark contrast to Trump's bombastic pronouncements. It further solidified his image as a leader of courage and conviction, a man who placed the needs of his people above personal ego or political point-scoring. In the court of public opinion, there was little doubt who emerged from this exchange with their reputation enhanced.